Alright, hello everybody and welcome to Let's Talk Wrestling, where we talk anything and everything professional wrestling. From runs in certain companies, to pay-per-view events, to just overall news. Granted, I'm not much of a news person, but anyway. Let's get into this week's topic. Sting's run in the WWE. It is one of the most underwhelming runs in the company's history. Okay? They bring him in, they have him lose in two big matches. The first loss in the first big match doesn't make sense, but I'll get into why in a little bit. But let's talk about Sting. For those that are unaware, Sting is a professional wrestler. He is currently signed in AEW. He was signed to Jim Crockett WCW from the 80s to WCW's closing in 2001. With his last televised appearance for anything that WWE has the rights to, being, I believe it was end of March of 2001. I don't remember the exact date, but it was like March something 2001 against Ric Flair. And then from there he goes to work in independent promotions. I think he announced a pseudo-retirement. I'm not 100% sure on that one. In like 2002 or like 2000. Fuck. I keep screwing up. I'm just going to roll with it. I'm not sure what happens between the time that he goes from WCW to NWA, TNA, now Impact. And he has a successful run there, taking part in various storylines, holding the world title on a few occasions, being part of the main event Mafia, being part of the main event scene for a while there. And then in 2014, he leaves TNA to go to WWE. This is where the interesting part comes in, okay? So Sting debuts at Survivor Series, and I'll give you guys a rundown here real quick about what's going on with the Authority, because they were a major part of programming at the time, albeit against the fans' wishes. And it was probably one of the most overrun storylines. I was bored with it at the time, really. So, at Survivor Series, there's a match. Team Authority versus Team Cena, and if Team Cena wins, the Authority is ousted from power. Right? So, Team Cena wins, and in this match, the reason Team Cena wins is because Sting debuts and basically drags a lifeless Dolph Ziggler onto Seth Rollins' body to, for Dolph to give him the pin. I wish I could explain it better, but that probably just sounded all wrong. So, Sting helps Ziggler pin Rollins. Okay, that's better. Okay, so let's continue. So that's obviously teasing a storyline, right? And then in January, continuing off of the Team Authority, Team Cena storyline, Cena reinstates the Authority, and he essentially gets his Survivor Series team members fired for whatever reason. I don't know. They were just like, hey, you had us ousted from power, we're going to fire your friends. That's literally the only reasoning I remember. So John valiantly tries to fight to get their jobs back. He messes up once. He screws it up once. and then proposes a match or proposes that if he wins at Royal Rumble, they get their jobs back. Triple H says, no, no, no. You have to put something on the line. So if you lose tonight, you are out of the main event at the Royal Rumble. Which, to refresh your guys' memory, the main event at the Royal Rumble, other than the Royal Rumble itself, is John Cena versus Brock Lesnar versus Seth Rollins for the WWE Championship. Okay? So anyway, Sting comes out, distracts Kane and Big Show, which allows Cena to get a roll-up victory on Seth Rollins, giving Eric Rowan, Ryback, and Dolph Ziggler their jobs back. So this leads into the month of February where, Sting gets challenged by Triple H, and on March 9th, if I do remember correctly, March 9th, I can see it right now, Sting answered Triple H saying, I accept. Okay? So that obviously was like, okay, there's a match between Triple H and Sting, which is fine, just as long as they don't turn it into WWE versus WCW. What do? They make it's good to make reference of history in promos. But I'm just gonna skip to the event because they did obvious build up, and they did mention that Sting was a lone soldier from a forgotten war or some wording like that, something about a forgotten war, and he said, I'm not gonna fight for WCW anymore because that's ridiculous. But what happens in the main event? Well, let's talk about this. Okay, I want to talk about why this booking decision doesn't make sense now compared to then. Okay? I don't even think it made sense then. Even I'm like, what? Why have a guy lose in his first match if you've hyped him up so much to be a credible threat? But let's talk about the booking after Mania and why it really didn't make sense. Okay? I don't think it made any sense for Triple H to beat Sting. Because Triple H was not the biggest star of the Attitude Era. He was not the biggest star in the company. In fact, by this time, by the time Sting was, let's do a little comparison. When Sting was at his most popular, so 1996, 1997, Triple H was working the frickin' mid-card. Of course, in 97, the reason that 96 was because of the MSG incident, which I don't want to talk about. I know about it. I just don't know details to do a full synopsis of it. I'll just give you cliff notes here. So Triple H, Kevin Nash, Scott Hall, Shawn Michaels were working a house show. They were working two separate matches. I believe it was Razor and Triple H versus Razor versus Triple H and Nash or Diesel versus Michaels. So after Diesel versus Michaels, they all come out, they hug, and they break kayfabe, which is they break character, essentially, which has a lot of people backstage really upset. So if they're like, well, why are you talking about this? Because it goes into why Triple H is where he's at this point. So in 1996, Triple H loses the King of the Ring because I'll put this into perspective. If anybody thinks it's unfair, what were they supposed to do? Shawn was the champion. Diesel and Razor were out of the company. And Hunter was the only guy that didn't have a belt and wasn't leaving. So, really around like 1996, 1997, even into 1998, Triple H was still working the mid-card. It wasn't until 1999, 2000 that Triple H started climbing the ladder, so to say. But then, looking at where Sting ended up after Mania, he ended up in a championship match against Seth Rollins at Night of Champions. So, hindsight, it doesn't make sense because they literally had him go into a championship match with Seth Rollins, which he wasn't. I don't think he should have won at that point. I think when Seth won the match, I think it was a smart decision because they were building up a star, and Seth has proven that he is a very good talent. That investment paid off until Hell in a Cell, but that's another story. So let's talk about specifically why. Like, this match wasn't. The match between Hunter and Sting wasn't bad. But the notable interferences are NWO and DX. Oh my god. Are you kidding me? Okay. So for people that are like, why are you like that? Because they literally made it WWE versus WCW in the modern day. Okay, they've had attempts at this in the past with the Invasion, and it didn't work. So that was definitely something that I didn't understand. I'm like, why are they doing this? This makes no sense to rekindle this. It's so bad. It was like, no, don't rekindle that thing because it's dead and gone. So we had Triple H win and go back into retirement because, of course, he's done it to younger stars like CM Punk in 2011. Really, I don't get it. I don't get the booking sense behind it. Because if you're going to have Sting be a credible threat to Triple H, it wasn't like a 60-second match. It was if I remember correctly, it was a decently intense bout, but my memory could be foggy a little bit. It's been a while since I've seen the show. But I do remember Triple H winning the match, which to me doesn't make sense. Again, for the reasons stated. They put Sting into a main event, and people will say, well, star power. Yeah, but I don't think... Here's the thing. In wrestling, wins and losses should matter. There wasn't a story to tell by sticking Sting into the main event, other than I want the belt. That's the only major achievement I don't have. People say, well, what about the IC title? What about it? At that point, I don't really know if it was relevant. But anyway, let's continue talking about Sting's run in WWE. So, at this point, building up to Night of Champions, which I believe was still called Night of Champions at the time. It could have been Clash, but I think that came later. So, let's talk about Sting's one and only win in the company. It was a tag match. Sting and John Cena versus Seth Rollins and Big Show on the go home show to Clash or Night of Champions. I do believe it was still Night. I will double check. Sting gets Seth to tap out. And if people are going to say, well, that's their way of making Sting look like a credible threat. Okay. I mean, whatever. But I was talking, like, for people that will ever mention me saying Sting didn't look like a credible threat. No, I was saying that in terms of to Triple H, because Triple H literally beat Sting. And he pinned Sting, and it was like, I didn't get the philosophy behind that win. Because Triple H wasn't on TV for, gosh, he wasn't on TV until Survivor Series, and then he didn't get back in the ring until Royal Rumble. And if people tell me, well, that was their plan all along. No. In fact, I could probably do a whole episode on Survivor Series 2015 and the build-up to it, and what happened after. And I might just do that, but I actually have to have time to watch, the shows in question, because that wasn't their original plan. Their original plan wasn't for Hunter, at least as far as I know, as for Triple H to go and win the Royal Rumble. I don't know why I call him Hunter, but there wasn't plans for that at that point. There's no way. Now, it very well could have been in the cards at Survivor Series. But remember, Seth Rollins was supposed to headline Survivor Series with Roman Reigns. But then Seth Rollins got injured, and they threw together a tournament that was like, oh hey, we're going to do a Deadly Games style tournament. And for people that don't know what Deadly Games is, Survivor Series 1998, go watch it on Peacock or the network. Depending on where you are. It's actually a fairly decent show. I actually sat down and watched it. There were a few notable matches on that show. We had Taker vs. Kane. We had Rock and Ken Shamrock. And we had Rock and Mankind. Those are the memorable matches that stick out in my head. But no, like, I really don't think losing to Triple H for Sting was the best scenario. Especially if they were like, oh, we're going to put you in a program with Seth Rollins. Losing to Seth was probably a smart move. I hate that Sting got injured in the match. For those that remember, Sting got injured with the buckle bomb. And he went into retirement up until 2020. And now he's working in AEW full-time. So, good for him. Do I think this run sums up Sting's career in a whole? No. He had a hugely successful career in wrestling. He is a star. Do I think that Sting's run in WWE could have been better? Obviously. He has probably one of the worst win-loss records in WWE history. And for people that point out, Kurt Hawkins, not Curtis, sorry. My brain's a little foggy this morning. I haven't had a lot of... Well, I'm drinking a Mountain Dew right now, but... Definitely an interesting flavor of Mountain Dew. Let's see. Mountain Dew Spark is a dew with a blast of raspberry... I can't speak. Raspberry lemonade. So it's actually pretty good. But for people like, well, it didn't hurt Sting because he's a star. There are people that were stars everywhere else, but they couldn't make it in WWE. But for people that say, well, they treated, well, what about Chris Jericho? Because he's from WCW. He defected. And he's had a largely successful career. When Jericho went to WWE in 1999, he was young. That was, let's see, that was 23 years ago. So he was still in his late 20s, early 30s. You know, he still had a long career ahead of him. You know, Sting was in his, like, late 40s to early 50s at this point in his career. And for people that say, well, what does age have to do with it? Sting doesn't have a lot of matches left in him, honestly. I could be wrong. I haven't been able to watch AEW. But I just think that his retirement's going to be rather soon. If you want me to be honest with you, I think, you know, that was his one shot in WWE, and he's like, I don't think that's what he wanted it to be. A lot of fans, myself included, were looking forward to a possible Sting versus Undertaker match. Which could have happened, because they were in the company at the same time. And if they would have played their cards right, they would have had a good WrestleMania, like a main event that everybody was hyped for. Would it have been any good? We don't know, because it will always be a what-if scenario now. I mean, was it everything that people had hoped for? No. But it did happen. He got a few matches. And that was the end of it. He left WWE 2 years ago when his contract expired. Either his contract expired or he got a release. I don't remember. People will tell me, you need to do your research. Yeah, but I also didn't want to talk about the run just in general. Again, in a year and a half, a year or so, give or take, of in-ring activity, he had 3 matches, 1 win, 2 losses. I feel like this is not the first... I know this isn't the first run they blundered. They blundered Goldberg's first run. And that's probably the reason... Well, I shouldn't say the blundering of Goldberg was the main reason Sting stayed out. It was just the handling of former WCW talent in general. The only reason Hall, Nash, and Hogan were treated fairly was because they were also ex-WWF guys. WWE guys, whatever. Because Hogan had a run with them in the 80s into the 90s. Hall and Nash were there in the mid-90s. So, again, curtain call incident. And for people like, who are Hall and Nash? Go look them up. I don't think Hall is wrestling. I could be wrong. I don't think Nash is wrestling either. Again, I could be wrong. But this is just me talking about Sting's run in the WWE. Probably one of the worst runs I have lived to see. And, yeah, let me know what you think. Do you think Sting's run was fine, looking at it objectively? Or do you think that it definitely, it could have used a little bit more work? Or there could have been, more thought put into it besides WWE and WCW? Because that was literally the first half of his run, was the reminder of, hey, we beat these guys. And he's the last holdout because he wasn't here, many years ago, type of deal. I thought that was kind of the whole WWE versus WCW trope when they brought those guys in, or when they initially brought them in. It was fine. It made sense because it was relevant to the wrestling world at the time, but almost 14, 15 years later, no. At the time, it was 14, 15 years. It wasn't relevant anymore because the time had passed. WWE had won the war, beaten WCW, literally buried some of its talent along the way, and it's done. But they still bring it up. It's okay to reminisce about the past, but constantly reminding everybody of it, or something that they're doing at Mania, is Steve Austin and Kevin Owens. They're relying on a nostalgia act. And Steve Austin, is that a bad thing? No. But if they start bringing him on every pay-per-view, it's going to get old. People will be like, well, they didn't mention it beforehand. It'd be like, yes, but when you know that Sting is synonymous with not going to WWE, they're going to bring it up because they can say, hey, we beat WCW just one more time. They overuse it, and it's I don't know. Anyway, I figure I'll end this episode off by saying thank you all so much for watching. Bye.